Servus and hello, I'm Matthias Eichler and this is Single Track and a bit of a different episode this week. This episode is all about the Beast of Big Creek, the little big mountain race on Mount Eleanor just outside Hoodsport, Washington. I took over the race a few months ago and this year's event is happening on July 23rd. There's still some spots open, so come on out and race with us. Sign-ups are live on Ultra Sign Up and visit rockcandyrunning.com/beast to learn all about this amazing race. The race is sponsored by some incredible supporters and I want to give them a shout out here and thank them for helping me bring this race to you. Kevin Hayward, State Farm, great friend of Rock Candy Running, an amazing local insurance agent. Kevin loves the greater Olympia area and loves supporting the local running community. Visit Laceywa Insurance, that's LACEYWA insurance.com, and see if Kevin gets you a better quote on auto, home, or life insurance. When I shared on Facebook that I was going to take over directing the Beast of Big Creek races, Steve Satoris from the Wilderness Outdoor Store in Bainbridge was one of the first to contact me. Steve loves the Beast and he said he wanted to do anything he can to ensure that it would continue. So once we had permits in place and the date figured out, his cool outdoor store on Bainbridge Islands was one of the first to jump in and sponsor the race. So if you're traveling through Bainbridge or go visit this cute little island just west of Seattle, be sure to stop by Wilderness right on the main drag in Winslow and visit wilderness.outdoorstore.com. Thank you, Steve and Wilderness, for your support of this year's races. Well, what can I say? Me and Tailwind are going way back. I had founders Jenny and Jeff on Single Track several times to talk about the wonderful endurance fuel they created and the incredible company they built. Tailwind has been a sponsor of our races from the first little backyard adventure to this year's full season. You'll find Tailwind at the aid station and, of course, at the finish line. And visit tailwindnutrition.com to learn more and be sure to sample some come race day. Rock Candy Running is also supported by Ole Fed, a local community bank with heart, and Club Ole Road Running. Come run with your local running community. All right. To help me tell the story of Beast, I brought in Ben Mead, local running friend and fellow podcaster of the new Chasing Cutoff podcast. Ben loves the Beast of Big Creek, and if he wouldn't be injured, he would run it. But this actually works in me and your favor because he'll be helping us out this year and we'll be at the Summit Turnaround high-fiving you all. Now, when I say Ben loves Beast, then I mean it's a bit of a love-hate relationship, but I will let Ben tell this story himself. You probably been a fan of the Single Track podcast since before it was cool.
Since episode 1, indeed.
Since episode 1.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited.
Long-time trail running friend, sort of almost neighbor, also in Olympia. And now also podcast host of Chasing Cutoff. Woohoo! Ben Mead is in the house. Before we dive into the topic of this week's episode of Single Track. Hello, Ben. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. Yeah, I love this race, and I'm excited to talk about it.
So before we talk about the race, let's talk about you a little bit. So you very recently started a podcast called Chasing Cutoffs. And, it's super exciting to have a new podcast on the scene. Tell people a little bit about it.
Well, sure. So about me really quickly, I am the self-proclaimed slowest trail runner in the Pacific Northwest, loud and proud. And my show, Chasing Cutoffs, focuses on the ultra slow, back of the pack trail and ultra community exclusively. So every week we just celebrate different athletes and achievements for back of the pack runners and make it as awesome as it is and talk about how the party's at the back, and it's just a lot of fun.
I mean, an alternate title would be Perpetual Golden Hour, right?
Perpetual Golden Hour. Sure, there's all kinds of alternate titles.
No, I think it's no, I think it's true. I'm not trying to help you with marketing language here, but I think there is something interesting, and I mean, I don't know. I understand why the limitations that I run far as a indie blog had when they started covering these races. That you only have that much manpower. You can only drive a race from aid station to aid station. You can only cover the top runners, right? There is sort of an obvious limitation of manpower of why that sort of created sort of this idea that we have a sport that goes 30-40 hours long on long races, but we're really only covering runners that take 12, 14, 16 hours to run this
Yeah,
thing.
I think it's twofold. It's like you said, there are some limitations to what we can do as media, right? Covering something. And that I can totally respect. But I also think that in general, in sporting, we love as humans, we love competition and victory and winners and duking it out and fighting for the win and the podium. And so that's very natural and normal. And I'm also a big fan of ultra running and all those super fast runners. I think it's really fun and really cool because I just love sports in general. You and I have known each other a long time. You know what a crazy soccer fan that I am as well. Um,
Even though you sadly picked one of the most difficult teams to follow over the last decade or so.
those who shall not be named. No, it's so funny. Now I can call myself a long-suffering fan of Manchester United because they have just sucked for about a decade, and so I'm just continuing
It's been
to feel the
hard.
pain. Yes, but as far as coverage of athletes and I think there's some really great podcasts out there that cover everyday runners. Yours is no exception. You cover all kinds of cool stuff on your show, not just runners, but mountaineering and all kinds of really cool stuff. Um, but there are very few, if any, shows that exclusively focus on the back of the pack. So it's very much a niche within a niche within a niche. But it's a lot of fun, and what's cool is that this little community of back of the pack runners are very passionate about their community, and they're very passionate about their stories and hearing other people and getting inspired and just feeling like, hey, it's okay to be slow. It's okay to be out there because we all have a place in this sport.
This is a little bit of an inside baseball question because it sort of connects to the conversations we've had before you started the podcast. And that is, has it been easy in trying to find information on these runners? Has it been easy to connect? Because it's seemingly very easy to call up perhaps it's hard to get through, but it's seemingly easy to contact a professional runner who has nothing else to do than run and to promote themselves and their brands, right? They're eager to spend all the time in front of the microphone. They might not love it, but they are sort of contractually obliged to do it. That's at least my perception. And so, if you have a back of a packer, well, I mean, they have other obligations outside of running to even try to get. So the scheduling piece, one thing, and then the other piece is like in terms of getting information on them, right? I mean, they don't have an
Finding them in the first place.
right. I mean,
Yeah,
they don't have an Hoka athlete page.
no, that's for sure. What I have done, because I do love the sporting aspect of trail and ultra running, is I've tried to focus on recent races. And what I do is I go find those races and I find the folks who landed on the DFL podium, aka the bottom three, and I try, if I can, to reach out to them, typically via Facebook, Instagram, however I can do it. I would say it's about 50-50 that I can actually find these people. And then once I do find them, it's again about 50-50 if they actually respond. But the ones that do are super excited and super grateful to be featured and asked to come on the show or get a shout out on the show. So it's that makes it worth it because the people that do respond are really excited about it.
That is super cool. Well, I'm glad your show is around and is another voice in the podcasting landscape. There is sort of an interesting, there's sort of an interesting growth where podcasting has sort of jumped into the mainstream, both from an adoption rate that people are recognizing that this is an actual medium, that you don't have to explain it. What are you doing? You're doing a podcast, what, right? But then also that brands and races are sort of starting to adopt podcasting as a important vehicle to a serious medium.
Yeah, absolutely. You see a lot more of these race directors and organizations will have podcasts that will either like do a preview of their race that's coming up and talk about the elite athletes and who might win and feature the course and stuff like that. So I think that's really fun.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the fact that we are still, as a sport, also sort of have limited funds. So a podcast is a very efficient way of getting getting lots of people in front of the microphone, right? I mean, you're able to connect with people. You don't have to fly them into a studio.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were, of course, a major inspiration for me because I am a longtime listener, first-time caller. And I remember when we were on a run many years ago talking about the potentials of podcasting, and it wasn't too long after that you started your show, and I've been listening for a really long time.
Episode 245, Ben.
Oh
245. I know.
It's crazy.
It is pretty nuts. But it's been also super, super fun. So let's talk about what we really want to talk about, which is in about 2 weeks' time, somewhat, the Beast of Big Creek race is happening, and this is like completely self-congratulatory. I took over the race, and this race has been happening for 10 plus years. How many years have you attempted run it?
Well, I've been aware of the race since 2017, and I can tell you that story of how I became aware of the race because it actually involves you. So this is just total random happenstance that my wife and kids and I, on a random August afternoon, decided to go up to Mount Eleanor and hike. And for the uninitiated, there are 3 entrance points, basically, if you want to hike Mount Eleanor. You can start at the very bottom at the Big Creek Campground. There's sort of a middle parking lot halfway up, and then there's an upper parking lot. And the vast majority of people park at the upper parking lot and do the hike from there. And I don't know, what is it, like 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles to the peak from that parking lot? But gosh, it's super hard.
I think just... Yeah, exactly. I mean, you are almost already above tree line.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you just have...
I mean, it's still super challenging, which is why most people do it from there. And that's what we did that day. So we're just on a hike, and I'm hiking up the mountain, and all of a sudden, I see Matthias and Trixie blazing down the trail, and they've got race bibs on, and I'm like, what the heck is happening? And you fly by me, and I'm like, hey, Matthias. So that was my first introduction. It was just totally random. And of course, my brain, the rest of the time we were on that hike, was just going, what is this thing? This looks so cool. So you can take it from there. Tell me about your 2017 experience. Was that your first time around?
No, 2016 I ran it first. So for me, well, it's funny now I'm throwing it back at you because you're the one who got me into running in the first place. Because I was always telling you that I don't run because I don't have a soccer ball in front of me, so that's stupid and pointless. And that theory worked in my late teens and early 20s, and eventually you're approaching mid-30 and you realize, well, wait a second, trying to find people to run is actually, or to play soccer with, is super hard, so you actually don't get any exercise at all anymore. I might as well start running. Started running around the same time when I first had an iPhone, so I could actually start tracking, which allowed my geek in me to sort of like quantify what I was doing. And podcasting happened around the same time too, so I could actually listen to podcasts. So I had sort of multitasking, could do something. I sort of got into running, but I always said I will never do a 5K as a road run. That's all stupid. And then I got introduced to and then I got introduced to trail running, ran the hillbilly half, and I was like, this is amazing because this is the most accessible way to adventure that I can think of, because it's, you know, if you're running fast on the trail, there is a level of adventure and risk. But I mean, it's not mountain biking. You're not going to break your collarbone. I mean, you could, but you're lower to the ground. You're not as fast, right? I mean, you're running on trail. So it was the most accessible way for me to get this adventure in that excited me for trail running. And then as a result, after Hillbilly, I was like, okay, what other races are out? Learned about Beast of Big Creek. And I was like, well, I've done Mount Eleanor a few times. How hard can it be? Ran it.
Now, when you said you've done it, that means you hiked it from the upper parking lot.
I've hiked it from the lower parking lot a couple of times before. And so I at least had like the sort of, I don't know.
Here's what I'm curious about, because back in the day, this race has been around for a while, but this is one of the most grassroots, underground races out there. How did you even find out about it?
Well, back then I did a lot of research because I realized that trail racing was really an exciting thing that I had absolutely no idea about. And so I tried to find cool trail races. And at that point, I certainly wasn't interested in ultras yet, because the distance and everything just seemed outrageous. The logistics and cost and travel, right? And so I tried to find stuff that was local and easy to do. And so I think it was just in Facebook internet sleuthing where it was like, okay, this seems like a race. It was inexpensive, was local, right? I mean, it was accessible.
Now, has the race always been the same distance and course?
Here's the trick part. That brings us from 2016 to 2017. Those were the times when the Big Creek campground got a lot of construction done. And that campground loop trail didn't exist. And so 2016, we started from the kind of day use parking area, and it ran up and ran back down.
So the race was a little bit shorter.
And therefore was shorter. And then in 2017, they moved it to Loop A and B. And so, yes, dear listeners, this is like super inside baseball, but we're going for it. And they moved it, John moved it over, and the Big Creek Trail got finished up, the campground loop got finished up. And so the race went from like a sort of half marathon to a 14 plus mile, right? And so all of a sudden you had like an extra mile of trail, and he only increased the cutoff by 15 minutes or something like that.
Well, I think we should probably talk about that now, because that is the bane of my existence, is this specific cutoff. Speaking of chasing cutoffs, this has been an ongoing issue for me at the Beast of Big Creek. So I get super inspired seeing you and Trixie charging down the hill, and I think I talked to you about it over the course of the following year. I really, really wanted to do it, and I signed up, and my first attempt was 2018.
Okay.
And how many, correct me if I'm wrong, is this like 5,000 feet of gain?
It's, I think, it's over 5,000, right? Because
7-ish miles or something.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The first 3/4 are pretty delightful in the trees, pretty soft, buttery, lovely trails.
Well, but if you say delightful, you were still...
It's very steep, don't get me wrong. You're climbing the entire thing.
There is really very little flat sections, right?
No,
I mean, you
flat.
getting
You're
out of
climbing a mountain.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're covering 2,500 feet of vert in 3 miles, and so it's just up, 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 up,
Yeah.
right?
But when you do come out of the trees and you enter that section where most people hit the trail from the upper trailhead and you come above tree line, it is not anything to be trifled with as far as technicality because it's very quickly becomes super challenging rock and like rock stairs that have been cut into the terrain and just really really you're on top of a mountain at that point.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the unique things about Mount Eleanor, that it is considered a hike, but and the Mount Rose Trail crew, who is keeping up these trails, and we love them to bits because of their incredible work that they're doing. They've actually made the trail safer, especially on the upper section just below the summit block, because there were a couple sections where the trail was had a lot of kind of really really small loose scree, and so you had not a lot of footing, and they put lots of steps in there. But
Yeah, there's still, I think, one long scree shoot.
Yes,
That
exactly.
if anyone's gonna attempt this race, I would just say just bomb down that thing if you can, because if you try to go slow, you're just gonna slide anyway.
Well, I mean, I think this is one of the challenges with that upper section above tree line, that there are so many rocky steps that the uphill is hard, but on the uphill you're thinking about, well, I'm going uphill, so it must be hard, so you're mentally prepared for it. What you're not really prepared for it, especially when it comes to timing, and I think that's where people lose the race, that on that first part downhill, the technical part, you can't go fast. I mean, there are some people who can go fast, but it
I've seen it,
is,
I've witnessed it, but yeah, no, I can't do that.
yeah, it is super technical. Um, and it is somewhat, if you go fast, it can be dangerous. And so I think, if somebody calculates this out and says, well, 7 miles up, 5,000 feet, and then 7 miles back down, well, I can bomb down fast enough that I should have no problem in finishing this in 4 hours or so,
Yeah,
right?
there's at least 2 miles there where bombing down is very, very risky.
Exactly, exactly. And so that makes it a true mountain race. And I mean, thanks for John Johnson, the race director from Shelton. He is a previous high school cross country coach out there, and he started this race 10, 11 years ago, and he always wanted it to be a running race, and that's why he kept the cutoff so short. He says if you want to hike it, the trail is right there, right? But if this is supposed to be a race, and he kept it short, the cutoff tight.
Oh, such an evil cutoff. So I believe it was 4.5 hours. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, I can tell you. I'm just playing along here, but I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
for a
yeah.
fact that it was 4.5 hours. So I did go out and run this thing for the first time in 2018, and I actually had a really bad day, just in general from a racing perspective. So that actually colored my decision to do it again the next year. But my 2018 experience, I had for the first time major GI issues during the race, which was just the first time, not the last time, unfortunately, but the first time I've ever experienced that. And really, really, like, even had to stop at some point, like, because I was in so much discomfort from a gastrointestinal perspective. Um, that was on the way up. And then on the way down, I took my first and hopefully only, knock on wood, like major fall. I wasn't in the super technical section, which is interesting because I had gotten past that. And then I knew I was really, really pushing it as far as the cutoff was concerned. So I was like, okay, you're on this really long downhill. The trail is way less technical. It's time to freaking bomb down this. And I tripped and I actually broke my thumb when I landed, and my hand was super swollen and it was just a complete disaster. And I've told this story before on my podcast, but I literally rolled into the finish line, and my finish time on that very first year was 4 hours and 50 minutes. So I roll in 20 minutes after the cutoff. Finish line is torn down. There is maybe 3 people standing around. I don't think the race director was still there. I don't think anyone cared that I was out on the course, and it was quite an experience. And I went home, and after that race, and I was obviously had a really bad day, really hard day. And I told my wife, I'm never running that race again. I was so just pissed off at the world because of the experience that I had had. But man, there was something about that
Well,
race.
let's
Something
just say
about that race.
we just chuckled about the fact that you came in 20 minutes late and everything was torn down. The race director had left. And we sort of lightheartedly wiped it away. And I want to say, as a race director and, I don't know, fellow human being, that's not nice, right?
Let's be fair. Maybe he was still there, but he did not acknowledge me, and I didn't know who he was. So there was no hug or high five, or the clock was gone, the finish line was gone. So no, it wasn't a pleasant experience, but I think that is a relatively common experience if you are a you know DFL specialist like myself, or someone that tends to DNF on the regular.
I mean, the logistics around all of this is tough. And I mean, that's why on longer races, you have cutoffs at 8 stations beforehand, because you just can't have people out there forever, right? I mean, there needs to be a certain thing. And with Beast, you only have one 8 station halfway up the mountain and stuff. And so it does get tricky logistically. And so I understand both sides.
For sure.
Right? I understand both sides, but I want to say to you as a runner, there was just a video floating around on Twitter where a woman who had just survived breast cancer signs up for a 10K and trains for like 18 months to run it, and there were only 20 people signed up, and she comes running around the corner in the distance, and they're just folding down the finish line arch, right? And it's
That's
like
heartbreaking.
It's just super, super hard, and there's sort of a reality that it's not like you didn't run with a watch. You knew that you'd be late, right? It's not like you expected.
Oh man, yeah, and I was
everything,
in pain,
right?
Because I had taken a pretty hard fall.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's. I guess you can say it's the normal thing for the back of the Packers, but yeah.
Well, I appreciate that from hearing from a race director, and I think that's reflected. I won't give it away, but I think that you've made a few changes now that you've taken over. But I tell you what, man, in 2018, or forgive me, 2019 it was, I wanted revenge. The revenge of the Beast of Big Creek is what I was looking for. So I broke my promise to my wife that I said I would never run this race again. I signed up again. I actually convinced a friend from work to come out and do it with me. And I had a way better day. Everything went right. I had no falls, no GI issues. I actually cut off a whole whopping 10 minutes off of my time. And of course, I DNF'd again, coming in 10 minutes over the finish, over the cutoff time. And I went home and I swore to my wife that I would never run that race again.
I mean,
and that was 2019.
So you've attempted it 3 times.
No, I've only attempted it twice, just 18 and 19.
Oh, 18 and 19. Yeah.
Or I'd never do it again.
Right.
And I may not have actually done it again. I didn't do it in 2020 or 21. But when I heard the news and I saw the announcement that Rock Candy Running was taking it over, I think the very first thing I said to you was, congrats. And then maybe the second thing I said was, what about that cutoff?
Well, you see, you are lucky because my wife missed the cutoff in 2017 by like 8 minutes or so. Yeah, it was really brutal because, well, I paced her that year. I was running Squamish, so I didn't win 2 weeks later. So I decided to pace her. She wanted to run Beast, and she had a great time other than... And she is not somebody who really cares about time, so I looked at my watch and knew we'd be missing cutoff, but I didn't push her to try to make it. I was like, it is what it is. You run your race. And I didn't push it that year for myself. I was just running with her because I was getting ready for Squamish. So I have a big motivation too to extend the cutoff of that race because, personal bias, personal connections obviously make it easy, but I don't really know why a race like that has to have a 4 hour cutoff. And I'm not trying to throw John under the bus. He had a certain theory behind what he wanted that race to
There are
be.
permits, there are volunteers. You kind of you do the equation, and you come up with a number, and you go with it, right?
But I think for him it was more ideologically, right? He wanted to say, okay, if you see the cutoff, then you should only attempt it if you think you can complete it. Because
maybe scare away the slow people, basically.
Sort of, right? And I'm like, well, if this would be hard rock and you have thousands of people applying and a fixed permit, then you can easily sort of make it difficult because you've already got more people than you can handle. But Beast is not selling out. And therefore, why not let everybody in who wants to, and why not give everybody the chance to finish who wants to, right? That's my thinking.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So do you want to reveal what the official cutoff has been extended to?
Well, I just think I'm going to sit there for 6 hours, right? I hope that everybody's going to make it in by perhaps less than that. Perhaps I get bored.
Yeah.
and then the next year I can say, okay, you know what?
Right. Maybe we only need 5.5 or 5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Perhaps it feels too long to sit, but I don't know. I think 6 hours doesn't really feel like too much.
What I like about that is because you've just taken it over, you're not really sure what to expect. You want to make it inclusive. Set it at a high number and see what happens. And unfortunately, spoiler alert, I am currently dealing with a long-term injury. I'm not trained, so I'm not going to be able to run it this year, even though I want to really bad. But I will be out there helping, volunteering, helping you get this thing going. But I have a question that I always find fascinating. I don't know how much about this you can reveal, but I'm curious if maybe other people might have the same question. But how does this work when one race director takes over for another? Because we see that a lot in different races. I think actually you just referenced on last week's episode Secret Beach going from James Varner over to new race director, and I think that kind of thing happens a lot. But I don't understand the behind the scenes. Like, how does that happen? How it's not like a real estate listing. So how do you find out that a race is quote unquote for sale or whatever?
So, I can't speak to the sale part because nothing's sold, right? Especially because I didn't approach John and say, hey, you look like you're out on the way out. He basically announced that he wouldn't be doing Beast anymore. And then I got a note on Facebook saying, somebody should take it over, wink, wink, Matthias. And then I contacted John and said, dude, are you done? I'll take it.
Wow.
And so he was already done, and he would have let it just go, right?
It just would not have continued.
Exactly. Personal reasons. He's moving away. Kids are finished with school. He's running for 10 years. He's ready to move to a different part of the country. I get that part, right? And the race didn't have the brand cachet of a Chuckanut or Backcountry Rise, right? That it would be almost criminal to just let it go away, right? It would be like
I have to agree with that, because even though this race has been very grassroots and somewhat under the radar, what people don't know, if you haven't done this race, it's spectacular. It is unending challenge, but you literally get to the top of a mountain with an insane view. You have incredible terrain the entire time, from really, really deep, lush, beautiful forest into super rocky, craggy, and potentially some mountain goat encounter. I mean, you're that high up, right? It's so awesome. And I've always thought, man, why is this not like an official like sky race or something? Like that's how I think of that race. Is it's that hard and it's that spectacular. So I totally agree. You cannot let this thing go. And if you get even an inkling that it's available as a race director, you got to jump on it.
Absolutely. And here is the thing that's truly valuable. And that is the permitting with the land entity, right? In this sense, the National Forest Service, like
meaning like not letting it lapse because
exactly,
because if they don't get a request, and then you got to keep it going so that they just
so John made the introduction to the National Forest Service and said, "Hey, Matthias is going to be taking over," and you know how it is dealing with these entities. In general, you can get
FYI, I don't know how it is dealing with these entities.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm just saying, right? I mean, if you're trying to get a permit for anything and you have to work with government entities, they don't really see you as a customer. They don't really have to help you. It's not like you walk into a store and they have permits sitting around and you just pick the one that you want. They don't have an incentive to sell you a permit, right? So any of these entities are happy to work with you, but it's usually a process, right? They're like, who are you? You need to explain yourself, right? You need to make sure you are worth their time, right? You have to establish what you're even trying to do, and they have to look at this and saying, okay, does this even make sense for these trails and stuff, right? And so once you have something established, though, they don't, unless you like royally screw it up, they don't really have a reason to not renew the permit.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you let it lapse, then you got to go in and sell it all over again.
Exactly. You have to do the selling all over again, right? It's not impossible, and people, but it's sort of, you have to completely reestablish. And that's where the true value was that for me to take it over, and was that John and I were able to, contact the National Forest Service together and just say, hey, I'm going to do this. And they're like, okay, you've done this in the past. You're doing it again. Who are you? Okay. This all makes sense. Perfect. You got a permit.
Yeah. Well, my other question is, are you making any changes outside of the cutoff, which is definitely a big positive change? Are you making any course changes to the time of year that it's being run? Or are you trying to just kind of keep it as is?
So because I took it over so late, and I have another race that is in early August, Little Backyard Adventure here in Olympia, which is at the same, around the same time, a week after the way usually Beast has been. We usually sort of had 1 week me, 1 week him. And so I couldn't put Beast in early August. So for this year, I moved Beast into late July, but it's only for this year. Because I had LBA already announced, and I couldn't, logistically, I just couldn't manage two races.
Why do you think it's better to do it in August? Is this a snow concern?
Yeah, I think next year I'm going to move it back to August. Well, it's both. It's snow, and it's the weekend that I'm going to be doing Beast this year is Cascade Crest, which is the biggest 100-mile race in Washington State. And so lots of people who, it's 100-miler, so people not necessarily run Beast, but aid stations support pacers and stuff. So a lot of people are out running Cascade Crest. So it's not a good weekend, so I'm definitely not going to keep it there.
So, yeah, you don't want to compete with just...
Exactly. So I'm going to move it back. So this change for this year is a one-term change. And so then then I said, okay, for this year, again, because of lateness and because I wanted to sort of honor Jonathan, I tried not to change a whole lot. Like, I didn't want to immediately introduce a double or something like that, right? I'm saying, okay,
Right. Oh my
let's
gosh.
just let's just do it the way it is, right?
Uh-huh.
Both for the permitting agency. Like, I asked for a larger permit, but they didn't give me that. They said, okay, last time, the permit was that many people. I think we can easily fit that many people in terms of parking
Okay, so when you say larger permit, you mean people,
capacity.
parking,
Exactly.
cars. Okay,
Exactly.
gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. So pretty much left everything the same in order for me to understand how all of this works, because I had, running in 2016, 2017, I had never run the full backside of the downhill forest loop, if you will, because
Right, yeah.
when I ran it, we went straight down the
Uh-huh.
way we came. So I ran that to kind of figure this out. So the one big change that I made, and that is actually an important piece that I want to announce for people planning on
Big
running
announcement.
these
Here we
things.
go.
I know. I moved the aid station. So John had the aid station at the lower trailhead, which is the middle trailhead, right? But it's called the lower trailhead of Eleanor, and sort of walked minimal aid into the trail junction where the trailhead trail connects to the main Big Creek Trail or Eleanor Trail. I'm moving it up to the entrance to the actual parking lot of the upper trailhead. And I found a trail that connects when you run up, that connects straight to that trail, and it sort of makes a V, and then you take the upper trailhead trail to go back up. So you're going to
So
hit
there's
that.
a little bit of a jog. You're gonna have to go over to the aid station and then cut back.
Exactly. So you don't have to return the same trail. It's a V. So it's two different trails, but it adds a little bit of distance, like 0.2, 0.1 or something like that. But the aid station is now out right at the trailhead. There's a bathroom there. There's a picnic table there. So hopefully,
So from a volunteer perspective,
volunteer
easier.
and for racers too, right? Hopefully we can provide a little bit more than sort of that minimal support that previously was at that
It was
aid
like
station.
a card table with a jug of water on it. And
Exactly,
and some
right?
gummy
And
bears.
yeah, exactly. And now we'll be able to do a little bit more because we don't have to walk it into the woods.
Gotcha.
So that's the one big change.
Okay, cool.
So-
Yeah, it's super exciting.
So yes, and then and I mean, let's talk a little bit logistics. The two big X factors that I've been working with that is important for runners is that the goats are back, and that's the thing. We love the pictures of the goats. And
Well, just for some context here, there were goats there for years. They were actually brought in, I think, in the 1960s for hunting purposes.
I
So
think
they're
even
not
before that, but
native.
yeah.
Yeah, not maybe 50s, 40s.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure. They're not native to that
Yeah.
area. We do have mountain goats that are native to our North Cascades, but not down in the Olympics. And so some years ago, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, right? They all got together and said, we got to get these goats out of here. And listeners at home, if you want to watch something funny, you can look this up. But watching them move the goats in these harnesses with a helicopter is actually pretty comical. So how do goats come back?
Well, they didn't get all of them, right? I mean, how do you know if you got all the goats?
And they've been
And you know how
multiplying.
how the birds and the bees and the goats, right? If you have enough goats left over, then they come back.
So the goats are back. So how does that impact the race?
So, well, number one is if you're actually racing, as much as it's cute to have goats, it's probably not good to have these goats because you mentioned that they're non-native. They don't actually have the natural resources to thrive in the Olympics, and so therefore they are very attracted to the human urine and sweat because they need
Anything
more
salty.
salt.
Yeah.
And so they are flocking very close to the trail where people move. And while we haven't had any dangerous encounters with goats on that particular trail, it's really not the greatest thing to have
It's something you should be
these
aware
goats
of
around.
if you're going to run that race.
You have to be aware of, but they just announced that they're actually going to be closing the trail starting Monday evening, this coming Monday, which is July 11th, until the 22nd, literally the day before my race. Don't ask me
Whoa.
about my logistics and how I'm going to figure out how to get the course flagged and stuff. That's a conversation for another story. But they're actually going to do another goat removal these next 2 weeks.
Wow. Well, I mean, A, that's a good thing.
Yes.
But B, don't ask you about the logistics. How the heck are you going to get this going? I mean, isn't the race on the 22nd?
23rd. So they're
23rd.
opening the trail back up on the 22nd at 11 o'clock latest. So there's a chance that they're going to be opening it up earlier, but 11 o'clock on the 22nd, I'm going to be at the gate, and I'm like, hey, I'm here to course flag.
Oh my gosh. And maybe they get it done earlier. You never know. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And while I can't go on the upper trailheads and can flag the summit portion, I can flag the lower forest portion fine.
Oh, that part's not closed.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, because there's not really any goats down there, right?
Exactly. Especially because
Okay.
you mentioned harnesses and stuff like that. I think they're done with that. I think now it's just guns from the helicopter.
Oh, that's sad. They're not moving them. They're just taking them out.
I have an inkling, not anybody telling me. That's just because the last time the way they did it was they tranquilized the goats and then put them in these harnesses, and I'm not sure how successful. That looked really good, but I don't know how many they actually moved and survived.
Right. And they moved them up to the North Cascades National Park where they are supposedly native.
Yeah, exactly. So I think because it's such a short period, I think they're just like, we just need to be done with it. But that's just my assumption. I don't know anything about that.
Well, let's hope there's no goat carcasses out on the course.
Well, I mean,
show up to flag.
So here's the other thing, right? I mean, I don't think the carcasses they would leave because that probably would attract cougars.
Right. Yeah.
That would be even worse than having goats on the course.
Yeah, we're scaring people away now.
I know, right? Come and run this race. This is great. No, the thing that is, the other big thing is that we had record-breaking snow. And so literally half the course is still under snow.
Even to this day, as we record, it's still under snow.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly. Another absolute turnoff for runners wanting to consider coming out for this race. So I was up there July 1st, which is 8 days ago. But basically where the summer route and winter route split, there are two benches. They were completely covered in snow. You couldn't see them. That's how far the snow is down.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I know it's been warming up.
Yes.
And even though we've gotten a little bit of rain, I think it's very warm. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, it's going to be a different story. But if it is, let's just say hypothetically that at the last 500 feet or something are still snow covered. How will you approach that? Will you tell people to bring traction? Will you just warn people, or
so
how do you want to do
this is really the tricky piece with the trail being closed. That if I only hear on the 22nd, or if I only have access on the 22nd, I don't know how much information I can still get out to people, right? Because
in terms of like
people are camping and stuff. Exactly. So I think you should definitely bring poles and microspikes and have them as a backup with you if you're coming to if you're traveling and stuff, and have them in the car just in case it is something that you will need. It's going to get really hot these next few days, especially in the hotspot area too. So I have high hopes that it will be completely melted out, because the thing is, I think the upper sections are exposed they should melt out fine. I think it's the lower sections where just
It's
before the big
still
boulder
high,
flake,
but it's
right, where
also
it's
shady. Yeah.
high and shaded. Exactly. So there might be some spots where you're gonna have to cross. So if you're unsure about snow travel, definitely have traction devices. And because I can't go up there 4 days before and give you a status update, we just have to wing it, right?
Wow.
To
That's
the
crazy.
point that if it would be impossible, I was already thinking of perhaps we have to move the summit turnaround further down. I mean, if it would be treacherous, I would
Right.
consider that.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Boy, so many X factors
I
that's
know, right? So
gonna
this is
make this thing
partially
spicy.
a little bit the insights into what the brain of a race director.
Yeah. Now I know this race is already at least halfway sold out. I think that there's several people already signed up, and you don't have a ton of spots. So, but I'm guessing there's still a few
Yes,
available for folks to sign up today.
absolutely. Ultra Sign Up has the registration. rockcandyrunning.com has all the information about the race. You can camp the night before. There are only limited spots. There's not too many spots left, but you can come out camp the night before. And so yeah, so there are actually two races. If you don't want to deal with the potential of snow, with the potential of goats, with the potential of crazy steep climbs, you can just run the forest loop, which is a 6 mile, 1,200 feet, really fun loop through the woods
Yeah.
over some incredible bridges. With all the snow melt, there will be lots of water in those little streams. So it's a beautiful short loop that you can run down below, or you come out and you do what people come out for, which is the views, right? Once you're up there,
Hmm.
the
It's
interior
incredible.
of
Yeah.
the Olympics, and then southeast over the Puget Sound, and seeing Lake Cushman below, and seeing the volcanoes in the back. It's truly special, right?
It really is. Yeah.
And you're going to be up there for a few hours on the summit, and you're checking people off,
That's
which
my
is
plan. Yeah, if
which
you'll
is
have me.
absolutely, it's amazing. I just bought walkie talkies. John had
Nice.
mentioned that had bought some really super cheap walkie talkies, and they worked. And so I'm hoping that me buying really cheap walkie talkies works too for the distance.
I may
And
have a backup plan on that as well.
okay,
I
cool.
have to ask around, but I have some search and rescue contacts that I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
reach out
yeah.
to
No, exactly.
for
Because
radio.
I
So
think because it's sort of an out and back, I think, right? Logistically, I'm excited about this because you know, as being the person at the summit, you know when everybody has reached the summit, and then
right.
you can start packing up from up there, which will
Yeah,
be
absolutely. Because the summit is
still
not an aid station, right? The point of having someone up there, I think, is just to validate that folks made it
exactly,
and that they're turning around, and we're just checking
yeah,
them off for
yeah,
safety purposes. And just in case that they didn't cut the course and cheat, right?
exactly. I mean,
That's
exactly.
something else.
Those are the two. Those are the two main things exactly. And high fives. Come on, right? I mean, you just climbed
Yeah,
over 5,000
absolutely.
feet, right?
I think we're allowed to do high fives now. I don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think we're good with that. So yeah, I think based on my list, practically, if you come out there and park, if you park inside the Big Creek campground, you need a national park pass or a Northwest Forest pass. You can also park on the road where you might not need it, but it would be good and safe if you bring your national park pass. If you come out there, and as I mentioned, the aid station will be a little beefier than usually. So hopefully we have the usual fruit and gels and stroop waffles and whatever, peanut butter sandwiches and everything else. And of course, Tailwind. I just placed a huge Tailwind order. So we'll have that. And we'll have obviously all of that at the finish line too. Yeah. Oh,
Very
that's
cool. Yeah, super
that's
exciting.
nice.
Yeah, if you haven't signed up, go for it because you're in for something really, really special. All the little facts about it individually you're like, oh, that's 14 miles, 5,000 feet, and it's a lot of climbing, I guess. But you don't know until you get there. Like, it is really spectacular, and it's highly recommended. Very, very challenging.
It really is, and I talked to James Warner from Rain Shadow Running about it, and he thinks it's one of the coolest races in the entire Pacific Northwest. And I think, as much as I obviously enjoy hearing that, I think there is some truth to that because it's almost, or it is exclusively on single track, right? I mean, it's not a race where you run on forest roads because you're in a ski resort or something, right? I mean, usually these kind of permits are handed out. You have only so much trail between wilderness, where you'll never have a race, and forest road racing, which is sort of fun and you get the vert in, but you are in a ski resort or something, right? You're not really in a unique place where this race really gets you up to the summit. And it tops out at 5.9, which is sort of one of the most prominent peaks in that corner of the Olympic Mountains. So you are, for coastal mountain Pacific Northwest, you are fairly high up. So that's the beast of Big Creek. Ben, I'm bummed that you can't run it, because I knew about your DNFs. I knew about how heartbreaking it was, and obviously I had you in mind when I extended the cutoff, right? I mean,
next year.
Yes, absolutely. There is a story, right? So I run Hillbilly and I discover Beast, and I run it the first year. And as I run it, I write a race report on the Outdoor Society, and I write two reports. I write the race report, and then I write a listicle where I write the top 10 trail races in the Pacific Northwest. And you know how listicles work. You don't have to run every race in the Pacific Northwest in order to determine what are the greatest races, right? I just did a combination of what I thought were cool locations to run and what I thought, based on the website descriptions, were the coolest races. And I wanted to name some races which aren't the most obvious ones, right? And the combination of my race report and that top 10 article, because people obviously, search, best races in the Pacific Northwest, the following year brought so many new people to run Beast that John actually contacted me up and said, dude, thanks for writing this article, but people are like signing up left and right. Thank you. If you want to come back out and run it, I'll give you a free entry. So I ran it that following year. Yeah, that was great. But there were several people running that year who had completely misread my race report and weren't really ready for that exposed, challenging 5,000 feet to the summit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. They just
I think
came
there was
out
a lot
for
of carnage that year.
Oh man, if there's not a little carnage and a little goats, it is not the Beast.
It is not the Beast. Well, that is it. Ben, thank you so much for helping me. This year, I think, for race directors has been quite challenging finding volunteers. And, there's a whole nother conversation around how, as we're sort of unfolding ourselves after 2 years locked down and not hugging anyone at finish lines and stuff like that, right? I think we haven't really found that community piece again, right? And so I hear from people that they have a hard time finding people to come out and volunteer. So on behalf of all race directors, to you as a volunteer, and to all people who decide to volunteer at races, I think it's an important, super valuable and important component that makes our sport. Yeah, it's the glue that keeps our sport together. Right?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. And if you, like me, are injured and aren't doing anything, come on out, help out. Let's volunteer together.
Exactly. Ben, Thank you so much for coming in single track.
Thanks for having me.
Wait! Before I let you go, you should give some links and so we can tell people where they can find you and follow you and stuff, right?
The old podcast, yeah.
Yes.
Well, you can listen to Chasing Cutoffs podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We're everywhere out there, so just search for Chasing Cutoffs. If you want to get the latest and greatest when episodes drop, the best place to find us is on Instagram at Chasing Cutoffs. And we're on Facebook as well, Chasing Cutoffs Podcast. So there's different ways to reach out. But if you're into back of the pack stories and ultra slow DFL, DNF specialists like myself, it's a really fun show to listen to.
Amazing. Perfect. People, these links will be in the show notes. So everyone, you've got another podcast to listen to. How cool is that?
Woohoo! Thanks, Matthias.
All right. Thank you, Ben, for helping me tell a bit of the backstory of Beast of Big Creek. And hopefully that gets you excited to come out and race with us. And thank you to our great sponsors, Kevin Hayward, State Farm, serving the South Sound for over 10 years. Tailwind Nutrition, the best in endurance fuel there is. The Wilderness Outdoor Store on Bainbridge Island in Ole Fed, and Club Ole Road Running. See you at Mount Eleanor.